Self
Hi.
again. My name is Teresa Nanjala Lubano. I'm the founder and creative director at the Nanjala Company, which comprises of two different agencies. One is a marketplace for gardening and home decor. It's called Shop Nanjala, and the other is an African brand agency with a sustainability mindset, and it's called Nanjala Design. So today a small presentation just to take you through what designing a pattern design entails. And so I prepared a very short presentation, then I'll take you through the practical bits. um, Hopefully you'll be able to benefit from it, right? So first things first. Um, so there are a few things that you'd need primarily um, when designing a pattern, and specifically a pattern for textiles, right? So some of the tools you'll need are, of course, a pencil and notebook, a pen and ink. And the pen and ink is really important because once you draw the sketch, you now then outline it sort of and get the detailing in. Um, Thereafter, once you're happy with your design or sketch, you would then need a scanner or a scanning app, where you'd scan the sketch so that it's digital in a digital format, and then take it on your laptop where you'd have an Adobe Creative Suite software for you to manipulate it into patterns. So essentially, these tools are very important, and I guess everyone has a different way of doing uh, textile design, but this is sort of the bare minimum, the basics of what you'd require. Now, the Adobe Creative Suite has several applications, but the one that I'd recommend for surface pattern design or textile pattern design is Photoshop or Illustrator, or a combination of both, right? So, in my case, I'm well versed with both. So, but I prefer Illustrator because it has a very simple interface, and also in terms of just uh, drawing, it has very high resolution components to it. So you're able to basically clean up artworks very easily with the pen tool. And then when it comes to now making a repeat pattern, perhaps Photoshop would be better because it has a better color format, right? So the mix of two is great, but you can use one or the other or both. Um, of course, part of what you'll be doing is also trying to accumulate a lot of material around what it is you'd like to design. So I'd expect you to also be, looking at magazines or looking for inspiration, creating a mood board for what it is you'd like your collection to look like. So remember, pattern, you can create one motif that can create three, four different types of repeats, right? So a mood board would help you sort of create synergy across the various patterns you create. Um, Also, it can give you ideas of how to make them look different and unique, right? So I guess inspiration can be gotten from anywhere. So don't really sweat it, but I think the idea is for you to get to a space where you're happy with what the various patterns or colorways would look like once you finish and complete your pattern design. Then I'll simply take you through what I consider a sketch. We'll talk about that a little later. Then, of course, the steps now go in tandem. So you will sketch the artwork, scan it, redraw it on an Adobe Creative Suite software like Illustrator or Photoshop, make the motif into a beautiful art piece, sort of clean and ready to create the repeat. Then you'll then, depending on the canvas size you're looking at, you'll then create a repeat pattern. So for some people, like for screen printing, I know the standard is usually an A4 or an A3, or even bigger like A2, A1. But for textile printing, sometimes it's guided by the width of the fabric. So you'll see some widths being mentioned are like 47 inches, 60 inches, 72 inches. So the idea is to ensure that when you're envisioning your repeat pattern, it's guided by the final output. Yeah, so I think that's it, and what you envision as being the final artwork when it's transferred to the fabric. Then I'll simply right now here just speak to you about file saving formats, um, which I guess I've already mentioned, which is A3. It could be guided by the size of the fabric. Like in this case, I've written 150 by 100 centimeters, 150 being the width. And then, of course, you need to ensure that you label your files properly so that in future, when you go back to them, you're able to actually then remember what they're called and retrieve them accordingly. Um, Scale is a very tough topic in terms of determining the scale of the pattern. Um, and what I'll do is I'll just show you applications to show you that a repeat may be look the same on the screen, but you must dictate what the scale of that pattern would look like. Is it gonna be too big or blown up on the product final product? Will it be minuscule, minute little patterns on the item? So that's something the designer determines. The other thing is colorways. You may want to think about what color combinations you want to have. Do you want just one colorway, or do you want various colorways for the same repeat? So those are considerations you need to think about, and that just simply means that you need to also understand color spaces, your CMYK, your RGB, and your Pantone colors. These are the spot colors, right? So for screen printing, and I know for lithography printing, it's pretty exacting. You might need to work with spot colors and of course the key, which is black. However, for digital printing, it's a bit more dynamic and flexible. You can pretty much work with any color. On one pattern, you can have even, like up to 10, 12 colors on one pattern. And the digital printing machines are pretty much, they can pick up any color. So usually it's not a concern, but it's always good to understand color and color spaces when you're doing and designing your pattern for textiles. Then outputting the file is also a tough one. I guess this only comes with with experience. But yeah, every print house has their own outputting formats. But what they do prefer is a high resolution file so that they can then, um, ensure that your print will be of good quality, and of course it will not be pixelated. So printers will always dictate what sort of formats they'll require from you. And then of course sometimes when the file is very heavy, you may find yourself sending the file via um, links like WeTransfer, where you're able to send a very high resolution file without limitations, right? Because email has a limitation. I think Gmail has like 25 MB or 30 MB max, right? So, yeah, and then the final two steps are really for you to request for a digital proof before you print a full batch of, of prints on textiles. So, this is just what we call the sample um, file, the file that will create the sample. Ask for that sample before you then bulk print. I think that's essentially what I had to share in terms of from a theoretical point of view. Now, from a visual point of view, I'd like to just explain some of the things that I've mentioned that are important to note. So, when I say sketch, this is what I mean. It really is what's your inspiration, what is it that you'd like to translate into a motif. So, this is a sketch I drew way back in 2004, um, and it was part of an illustration class at the university. I really loved this flower. It was a botanical, I think it was a scientific class, a scientific illustration class. And what I did is I did a sketch of the Ranunculus repens, which is a type of flower. Now, of course, you can see here there's the full, leaves, root system, and petals. But what I did is for the motif, I only extracted a part of what I felt would make a beautiful repeat. So this is essentially the part that I selected, which created the little flowers that you see here. And what I did is I then went into Photoshop. After scanning it, I went into Photoshop and added the color in a very unique way. So what I did is I kept it very simple colored, like just three colors, the yellow, actually three to four colors, the yellow, the yellow orange, there's some green there, and of course there's the black. White, of course, is not a color in this case, but essentially I really played around with it because I wanted the motif to be bright and playful, right? Something that um, a motif that would be endearing to a child or a young adult, or just a fun print without restricting it to being childlike. So, and of course, something that also endeared people who love nature, because the inspiration was from nature. So I wanted to keep with the same theme. So the motif really is what creates the repeat. So if you put this box in here, you'll realize it repeats here and here and down here and down here. So the repeat needs to be extremely seamless. What that means is if I move this tile to this side, it should join at this angle. If I move this tile at the bottom here, this flower should merge and join on this part seamlessly, and also to the left as well as upwards. So designing a repeat, it may look simple, but it takes a lot of time for you to do. And I think the idea is it's a trial and error. It's also for you to understand the different types of creating a motif. There's half drop, full drop, um, uh, like this one is a random pattern, right? Where I've sort of scaled the motif into different sizes, and then I've sort of like playfully, angled them in different angles to create this repeat. So there are different ways to create repeat motifs. Go with one that you feel suits the motif that you've created, so that when you create the repeat, it looks beautiful. So shortly, I'll share with you um, some of the applications. So in as much as this is um, the repeat is made for textiles, it really is a surface pattern design. And that simply means you can create a plethora of many different products. Um, you had mentioned that you're a fashion student, so I'm assuming think of the applications that you'll be creating. Um, so, say for example, you'll be doing cushions or dresses. So, how would the motif look? Would you ask yourself questions like, will you scale the motif to suit the various applications? Like in this case, it's obvious that a pair of sunglasses is a very small item, and therefore I had to scale back the motif to be slightly smaller for you to capture a little bit or hints of the motif or pattern. Whereas if you look at, say, wallpaper, if you're to look at this in real life size, the motif would be slightly bigger in comparison to what went onto the sunglasses. So I think the idea is for you to just ensure that whenever you're designing a pattern for textiles, ensure you have the end in mind, right? Um, this motif is actually a real motif that I designed, and happy to mention that I'm currently retailing it at a shop called Contrado, as well as locally in Kenya. I have this very same pattern available on fabric on a platform called Undameta. So what I'll do is I will stop sharing here and now to ask for so that you may ask any questions before I take you through the technical bits. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you so much, Teresa.